My name is Greg Hayes. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Kish Bank. And today we're going to be walking through the Kish Bank Paycheck Protection Program Forgiveness Portal demonstration. I want to thank all of our borrowers who have joined us here today to get a view of the demonstration that will show you the portal we'll be utilizing to efficiently and effectively capture your forgiveness information and reporting, as well as a communication tool for secure communication between Kish and our borrowers. We appreciate your engagement and look forward to working directly with you to accurately collect the forgiveness information and submit it to the SBA. The first thing I want to walk through is our agenda. I'd like to point out that we have a Q&A feature, and if you hover over your screen or click on your screen, you'll see at the bottom one of the options is to click on the Q&A. We'll pull up a box, and it will allow you to enter questions that we will be answering towards the end of the demonstration. The agenda for our day is to do a quick overview of the PPP forgiveness process so you understand what the process looks like, highlight some recent SBA changes to the program, review the resources and reference materials that are available to you, and then show you the live demonstration of the forgiveness portal, which should take about 20 minutes, and then leave the remainder of the time for question and answer. I would like to note that we will not be able to answer questions related to specific borrower circumstances, and that there are still many areas where the SBA has not provided guidance around so many different aspects of the program. We will work as hard as we can to answer your questions, and any questions that we're not able to answer during the presentation today, we will capture and look to engage and connect with you later on. You will also see in the demonstration of the portal the ability to submit questions through that tool. First, just an overview of the forgiveness process. The first step in the process is for the borrower to submit to the bank all of the information necessary to process the forgiveness application. The SBA's application document is called the 3508, and now they've created a 3508EZ, which we'll talk a little bit about in a moment. We will be collecting through our portal all of the information necessary to complete that form. The other information that's necessary to submit to the bank is all the supporting documentation, and we will go through in detail as we show you the portal what some of that supporting documentation is and what the documentation has to show. The second step in the process is that the bank has 60 days to work with the borrower through our portal to review all the information and decision the forgiveness application prior to submitting it to the SBA. After that, the SBA or the bank will, after all the information is accurate and ready to go, we will get the borrower's final signature on the 3508 or 3508EZ application, and we will submit that electronically to the SBA. The SBA is still working on the mechanism by which we will submit those applications, and we have yet to hear an update on the status of that. I look forward to hearing from them in the near future. The next step is that the SBA has 90 days to remit the forgiveness amount to the bank. Following that, the bank will apply the forgiveness to the loan and adjust the payment amount based on any remaining loan balance. The borrower at that time has and at any time, has the ability to prepay any balance on the loan or pay off any balance on the loan that remains without penalty. That's a summary of the forgiveness process, and now I'd like to just walk through a few of the changes and recent updates, as well as highlight some reference material. One of the things we're going to show you today in the portal was the recent creation of the 3508EZ form, not from, I apologize for the spelling error there. The creation of that EZ form significantly reduces some of the calculations necessary and information required. There's actually a form that we'll talk about called the Schedule A worksheet. And if you fit into certain criteria, you're not required to complete the Schedule A worksheet, which is a big improvement. And we anticipate a strong percentage of our customers will not have to do that. And it's primarily based on the fact that many of our borrowers have not had to reduce their staff levels or staff salaries, compensation amounts during this period of time. They have been able to bring those employees back to work and bring them back at full employment. The other thing that the EZ form does is it applies to those sole proprietors and 1099 folks who don't have any employees. Makes the process much more streamlined for them. In reference to the reduced salaries, an area of clarity that has been provided by the SBA is on the discussion of the covered period and the alternative covered period. As many of you may be aware, they talk about a covered period being from the date the loan was funded. They have created an alternative covered period that would be inclusive of your starting at your next payroll date following the date that the loan was funded. So you can choose your covered period to be, and we'll talk about this in a moment, the 8 weeks or the 24 weeks following the disbursement date of the loan, which is the covered period, or the 8 or 24 week period following your first full payroll after the date of loan disbursement. And you will see in the application in the portal how we differentiate the two of those. The second very significant part of the recent SBA clarification came out of the forgiveness or the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act that was recently passed and signed by the president. And the clarifications there expanded from an 8-week period to a 24-week period, allowing businesses to bring their staff back to work over a longer period and extending the date that those folks have to be put back to work until December 30th as opposed to June 30th, which really expanded and created a lot of flexibility for borrowers to get full forgiveness of their loan. This does not change the loan amount, or it does not change the calculation of the loan, which was 2.5 times your monthly payroll costs. So all of that is still the same. This simply allows borrowers to bring their workforce back to work so that more of the loan amount can be forgiven. Finally, there was clarification provided around the reductions of salaries and the safe harbors that exist for those businesses that did in fact have to reduce some salaries or were not able to bring back employees due to constraints put on them by the government or constraints put on them by their workforce who were not willing to come back to work or did not accept the offers of reemployment. And those businesses that have struggled to fill those positions that they have put back in place. We will cover many of these in more detail as we go through the forgiveness application, but we recommend that all borrowers consult with their certified public accountant, and we will look to provide reference materials and future updates through our kishbank.com PPP page, which you can see on our website. This is the little logo box that appears where you can click, and we'll be updating information. We'll be looking to add reference material from local CPA firms that have been providing good guidance. Many of the firms have not updated their guidance because as of even Monday, the SBA was still updating information. The next phase of our presentation is the live demonstration of the Kish PPP forgiveness portal. This is what it will look like. I'm going to switch screens here and go through a live application submission and show you how to walk through each step of that application. But one thing I wanted to share on this page was that prior to our launch of the portal, which we hope to be late next week, if not early the following week, we are still, again, applying all of the changes that have come from the SBA over the last week. We will send an email to each of our borrowers, to the folks who were authorized signers on the loan documents, as well as the email address that submitted the original application for forgiveness loan, for a PPP loan with Kish. We will be sending out an email to all those individuals, which might be several individuals per business, with the SBA loan number that is referenced for that business. All borrowers will enter the EIN number for the business and the SBA loan number that we provide them, and then they will enter the SBA portal. And so I will demonstrate that for you now. Okay, so I have taken the EIN number for a demo customer and the SBA loan number for a demo customer, and I've entered them here. Next step will be to find my loan. For security purposes, we do have an identification process. The identification process requires that the borrower know how much the loan amount was for. And so I know, based on this test case, how much it is. So I select that. Here I will enter my email address and a password. And I will create an account. This takes me into the portal. Just to point out a few things, on the left-hand side, we have the status. This is the amount of your loan. This is the amount as you continue to process through the stages of the forgiveness application, how much is going to be or may be forgiven based on the information you have entered. This is kind of a running tally of your application process. And here is the status of your application. So as you have the application, you submit it to Kish and we review it. We require additional information. We approve it and send it back to you for electronic signature. You sign the document and it goes to the bank for final submission to the SBA and the SBA's approval. You will be able to check that status throughout the process here. In addition, we plan to add helpful links that will be similar to what we provide in the Kish Bank online PPP page on our website. We plan to replicate those links in this section here. One other thing I want to point out is the messages section. I did communicate earlier that there is a secure communication tool built into this application. If at any time you have questions that you would like to submit to your reviewer, or if your reviewer has questions, it will come through this message tool. And this will be a secure messaging tool outside of your email to protect the personal information or corporate information that could be sensitive to that application. Okay, to start the process and talk a little bit about some of the things that I reviewed in the PowerPoint presentation. You have two options: the streamlined 3508 easy process, as well as the full forgiveness application. And I'm going to explain here as we open this up the difference between the two, and I'm going to do that by walking through the easy application process first. When you select the easy application process, our system is going to do the same thing that the SBA's application does, and it's going to ask you to qualify your business for the easy process. And there are three ways you can qualify. The first way is if the borrower is a self-employed individual, independent contractor, or sole proprietor who has no employees at the time of the PPP application and did not include any employee salaries in the computation of the average monthly payroll in the SBA application form. That will be relevant for many of our borrowers who are those self-employed. For the companies who have applied, there are some provisions that allow you to fill out the easy application as well. That provision is mainly centered around the reduction in employee salaries. If the borrower did not reduce any salary or hourly wage of any employee by 25%, but more than 25%, during the period, the covered period or alternative covered period, and I will explain those again, compared to the period prior to the COVID impact, January 1st, 2020 and March 31st, 2020. And please note the definition of employee means only those employees that did not receive during any single period during 2019 salary or wages at an annualized rate of more than $100,000. So if you reduce the salary of individuals outside of $100,000, that is excluded. Okay, so salaries of any employee were not reduced by more than 25%, and the borrower did not reduce the number of employees or the average paid hours of employees between January 1st and the end of the covered period. Please note that documentation will be required to be submitted with the application and retained by the borrower if this box is checked. So we understand that you have not reduced the number of employees or the salary of employees by more than 25%. Additionally, you can qualify for the easy form if the borrower did not reduce the salary or hourly wages of any one employee by more than 25%. And if the borrower was unable to operate during the COVID period at the same level of business activity due to compliance with requirements or guidance issued between March 1st and December 20 by the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of the CDC, OSHA, or related other requirements for social distancing and other work safety. This is what they're calling the safe harbor, and we will review that in a little more detail as well. I'm going to continue this application, and we'll cover the process, explain the rest of the process. So the next step will be to start the borrower employment information. This employee, as I completed on the previous form, happens to be a sole proprietor. They have one employee. That was provided on the original application, and we will be filling that information in from the data you provided us at time of application. A lot of information at time of application we will bring into this portal relative to your business. So we brought this in, but it is important that you validate that it is correct. So that was the employees at the time of loan application. I am now going to enter the number of employees at time of forgiveness. For a larger company, let's say this number was 26, and I still have 26 people employed now, I would put 26. The other thing I have to do is note the description of our payroll. So for a sole proprietor, in this case, I have to say I take an owner draw. If you were a business, you would put in weekly, biweekly, twice per month, monthly, and you wouldn't include the additional information. And I take that owner draw quarterly. If your business happened to apply for an EIDL advance, is a $10,000 grant or an EIDL loan, please enter that amount here and include your EIDL application number. If you have questions about this, again, please use the question tool built into the portal. Now to the covered period. We talked a little bit about this in the initial presentation. The covered period is the period that starts directly after the disbursement date of the loan. And you will see that we have provided the disbursement date of each business's loan into our system. So that will be pre-populated here. If you have any question about that, again, please let us know. The covered period defaults to 8 weeks, but if you are choosing the 24-week period, please note that by selecting that 24-week period, and understand that the traditional covered period starts with the date of the disbursement of the loan. If you would like to choose an alternative covered period, which would be the first payroll scheduled date after the disbursement date of the loan, so that's the alternative payroll covered period, you could pick that and you could enter an alternative date. So if I got the loan and dispersed on April 4th or 17th, but my loan wasn't until, or my first payroll period wasn't until the 24th, I would select that. So we will go with the alternative covered period for this because, as I indicated up above, I take an owner draw quarterly. And so I didn't take my owner draw until the end of April. Here's a special note, a special section, 2 items that we need completed. The first is for any borrowers who, together with any other affiliates, as defined by their federal regulation here, referenced here, received PPP loans with an original principal amount in excess of $2 million, they're required to check this box. That means that if your business received a $2 million or greater loan, or if multiple entities, let's say one entity has related affiliates or different businesses that all roll up into one ownership, then you would check this box if the total of those loans is more than $2 million. The additional piece of information we need to collect is the 2019 annual revenue for the business. So if the entity, the borrower that is applying for forgiveness, had annual revenue of $2 million or $3 million, they would enter that amount here. This does not affect the forgiveness process. This is purely a data collection mechanism that the SBA is asking for. Okay, now to the forgiveness calculation. Based on the reference materials which we will be providing, the forgiveness application asks for your total cash compensation from the PPP Schedule A worksheet. This is the total amount of cash compensation. It also asks for the total cash compensation from box 4. Box 1 is for employees making under $100,000 total compensation, and box 4 is for employees making more than $100,000. So I'm going to enter total cash compensation for myself as the sole proprietor of this business. And I'm not going to put any amount in there because there is none. Then there is non-cash compensation costs during the covered period. So if I had payroll, which as a self-employed borrower, I don't have any, I would include any borrower paid expenses from my original application that were health insurance costs during the covered period. I would include any employer contributions to retirement plan during the covered period. And I would include any borrower paid state or local taxes assessed on employee compensation, not taxes withheld on behalf of the employee, but borrower employer paid. And so I don't have any of those either. Compensation to owners. Because the way I have this entity structured, I'm a single member S corporation, so I pay myself a salary. I have entered that in cash compensation. I don't have any compensation to owners in this box. If I, as an owner, paid all of my compensation here, I would do that. Actually, that's contradictory to my earlier. I'm going to switch these around. I told you I take a draw quarterly, so I'm going to move these. I don't pay myself a salary. I take a draw. We'll just do that. Please note that as you enter all this information, this will tally a total in this box, but it will not do it live. It waits until you save the application. So when we get to the end and we save our application, this amount will update. Or when I click to the next screen. It's not going to give you a live number, but it's also not a box that you have to enter information. And it looks like the SBA requires us to round. And the system corrects that. Okay, so I've brought over my $8,067 of payroll costs. This is where we enter any non-payroll costs. So on the previous page, you'll note, and we'll just go back so you can see how it updated that box. All payroll-related costs, so cash compensation, employer contributions for health insurance, employer contributions for retirement plan, and employer-paid taxes, all get entered. They are all payroll-related expenses. Now we go to non-payroll-related expenses. And what qualifies under this program is mortgage interest, which I have 0, lease or rent, which I didn't apply for any because I work from my home, and business utility payments, which again I didn't apply for. All of these items, are required for businesses that did apply for expenses or did include, are planning to include those expenses in the forgiveness calculation. I will note one other change that was recently made by the SBA and with the Flexibility Act that was passed is your payroll costs now no longer need to be 75% of your forgiveness request. They can only be 60%. So they reduced the requirement for the payroll expenses to be 75% of your forgiveness amount. They lowered it to 60%, which means that these items can be up to 40% of the amount you're requesting for forgiveness. And that is a new change as well that benefits a greater amount of forgiveness to the borrower. So the next page we go to is the uploading of information. So naturally, I'm going to have to upload information that supports the payroll documentation. So I can upload bank account statements or payroll reports for the covered period that show the quarterly distribution made to the owner in the amount of the $8,066. I could include and upload payroll tax filings reported to the IRS, which is typically the 941 form, or any state quarterly business and individual employee wage reports, or unemployment insurance filings. Payment receipts reflecting the employer contributions to health insurance and retirement plans would also be required for businesses that showed health insurance costs. or 401k contributions. The next is we have to document that FTE levels were maintained. So for me, I only had one employee. I have to show documentation that I maintained my full-time equivalent of workers in this company. And I do that by providing any documentation that shows both permanent and seasonal employees, if applicable, including forms like the 941 or any state wage reports that shows the number of employees during the covered period. And then finally, non-payroll documentation. So any of those payroll costs that were any of those non-payroll costs that were included, such as mortgage interest, lease or rent, and utilities, require copies of documentation that shows the amount that was due and a receipt that it was paid. So it would be a lender's amortization schedule, receipt, and account statements. For the lease, it would be a copy of a lease agreement and the payment evidence for the payment of rent or lease payments during the covered period. Or for utility payments, it's not just the fact that you paid it, but it's a copy of the invoice of the amount that was due. And one of the complexities of this is that in order for it to be included, as the bank goes through our review of this information, in order for it to be included and count towards forgiveness, it has to be billed and paid during the covered period. And so anything that was billed, you need to show evidence that it was billed and that that amount was paid. So if you didn't receive a bill for it, but decided to prepay it, it may not be covered. And we will work out any of those individual complexities with each borrower as we work through it. So in order to upload, I would choose a file that I have to upload. I would pick the spreadsheet for my payroll, and I would name it payroll report. And I would document it as a payroll type. Please understand, so with all of the required documentation you have up here, there are 4 different types: payroll, FTE documentation, non-payroll expense, and borrower demographic information form. We'll be providing more guidance on that borrower demographic form as we get guidance from the SBA. You will see that that was here. I could view that document. I can delete that document. I can upload more. But when I'm done, I go to the next summary. You can see here that I have a summary. I have some missing items, as well as a summary of the estimate of the amount that will be forgiven. My application could not yet be submitted because I'm missing important information. I did not enter cash compensation from the worksheet in box 1 or average FTE in box 2 of the calculation worksheet. And if I click on those, it will take me back to that amount. So I must have made a mistake in saying all of my compensation was compensation to owners and not putting it in cash compensation. So I, at this point, may send a question to Kish Bank or just decide, okay, they don't like the way I did it, so I'm gonna do it a different way. I'll put all my compensation here, and I'll put 0 here, and see if they like it that way. And I'll go to my summary, and you can see that fixed it. Okay, so now I've fixed it all. I have fixed all my errors, and I'm ready to submit my application. At this point, I need to indicate who is going to sign this application. So as the owner, I am going to sign it. I'm going to put my full name as I would sign my name on a legal document. I am going to put the email address for which I want to receive the DocuSign documents. If I can get my keyboard functioning. And my title, my corporate title is owner. And that's how I sign my corporate documents. If my corporate title is president, if my corporate title is CFO, I would use a title that represents my title in the company. I would then save my application and I would submit my completed application. Are we ready to submit? Yes. And then I get a notice of what to expect next. We talk about the fact that we will review your application. Once the application has been reviewed and all things are corrected, we will create the legal form required for your signature and send it to you electronically. Once you have signed it electronically, we will prepare to transmit that to the SBA electronically as well. And then upon approval by the SBA, we will adjust the loan amount representing the new remaining amount, if there is any, and send you any updated documents necessary for that. If you make a mistake, feel free to reach out to us at any time. As you will see on our website and in the helpful links here, you can contact us at lendingrequest@kishbank.com with any questions, or you can use the communication tool built into the portal here for messaging directly. The bank would have the ability to reopen your application now that it is locked and submitted to the bank. We can unlock it and reopen it if you feel you need to update anything, or if we find an error, we can do that. I'm going to just pause here for a moment and actually go back out to the main portal login and show you a few other features, as well as the section for those that are not doing the easy form submission. So you've previously submitted and logged in, and you want to go back in later. Maybe you didn't submit your application, you didn't complete it. Remember, if you save your application, you can return at any time to complete it. I wanted to point out one other thing here. Please note that if you are an accountant or someone with multiple businesses and multiple loans, you would access, I'm going to go back just to explain this here. You would enter the Social Security number or EIN, tax ID for the entity, and the SBA number for all of the entities. You would go through this process. You would find the loan. You would verify the amount. You would put in the same email address and the same password for multiple businesses. But you go through this process for each one of them. And if you do that, then what you will find when you log in is that you have access to all of the applications you have connected to your user account. So as someone who may be working on multiple loans, forgiveness loans, you will have the ability to see them all. Multiple people also have the ability. So I'm going to show you here in this one that multiple folks have access to this application. And this might not be the correct one, I apologize. But if, let's say, your CFO and your CEO and your accountant all created their own personal login to this, but they all use the same tax ID number and same SBA loan number, they will all be able to work on and see the application process and the status of it and provide information to it. Okay, you can see now that I'm not going to use the easy application. I'm going to go into the full forgiveness application. I'm just going to show you some of the differences. So this business has, and I've already completed the information in this application before. This number is 26 employees. At time of application forgiveness, we have retained all of those employees at 26. That would have meant, hey, you should have filled out the easy application. So let's assume we didn't retain all those employees. We had a reduction, so we only have 20. Or let's assume if we had 26 that we had reduced the salaries. And so we have to do the full application, and we'll talk about this here in a moment. We are going to do the 24-week period based on our disbursement date on the 15th. We are not going to use the alternative covered period, and so we're going to remove the alternative covered period dates from our process. We do not have a $2 million loan, and we're going to put in our annual revenue of $6 million. We're going to now proceed to Schedule A, and I'm going to show you a little bit of the difference. So if you noticed on the easy application, we were only required to complete one box for Table 1, which is the box 1 tally of the total cash compensation. And we were only required to enter one number for Table 2, which is the total cash compensation for those that earn over $100,000. Now, since we're doing the full application, there's some more information we need. And all of this relates to Schedule A worksheet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Kish Bank, and I'm going to go to our Paycheck Protection Program. I'm going to show you Schedule A worksheet and Schedule A worksheet instructions. And this is what is referenced in this section. So if you're not filling out the easy application, you are going to need to capture the information that would be tallied in this Schedule A worksheet. And here's Table 1 for employees who make less than or equal to $100,000. And here's Table 2 for employees that make more than $100,000. And for both sets of employees, you capture their name, an employee identifier, which can just be employee 1, 2, 3, 4, the total of their cash compensation, the average of their FTE during the covered period, and any reduction in their salary wage. So if you had 2 employees and you reduced both of them from a 40-hour work week or from a full salary to more than 25%, then we're going to have to talk about, your forgiveness amount will be reduced. And so this full application documents how much you have reduced that application. And I will also point out that if you start with the Worksheet A instructions, which is this document, and you start with these and you read through this, it will explain in much more detail how to calculate the cash compensation, how to calculate the average FTE, and how to calculate the salary or hourly wage reduction. The other thing that this form does is it helps you look at the safe harbor. And so you are protected if you were unable to rehire those employees, if you, for whatever reasons, we're not able to bring those folks back to work. And so there are some safe harbor calculations in the Schedule A worksheet that you can work through. Again, referring to the instructions and referring to the worksheet. And all of this information comes back to these fields. This is box 1 of the worksheet. This is box 2 of the worksheet. And this is box 3 of the worksheet. That is box 1, box 2, and box 3. In the for those that have compensation over $100,000, you fill in box 4 and box 5. Again, go to Table 2, the total of box 4, and the total of box 5. And the only difference here is they care less about the reduction of salaries for individuals making over $100,000, so it has less impact on the ability for you to get full forgiveness on your loan. You still have the compensation to owners. You still have a total that adds up to all of the compensation, and now you have a new section called the full-time equivalency reduction calculation. And so here you have to demonstrate that you walked through the bottom of this page, step 1, step 2, and step 3 in the instructions, or the steps under the safe harbor and the fields for step 1, step 2, and step 4 there. And you would enter that information in these boxes here to define your FTE reductions during the period. Then you would continue on to the non-payroll costs. Again, mortgage interest, lease payments, utility payments that I've already covered. You would upload the necessary documentation, and continue to the summary where you would submit. That summarizes the presentation of the demonstration of our portal.